Hello, this is Eric Thompson. I am owner and lead investment officer of Peerless Wealth, a registered investment advisory firm located here in Columbus, Ohio. As always, thank you for tuning in. The title of this one, Do Advisors Add Value? See what Vanguard and the Bored Ape says about it. Well, I'm going to get to the Bored Ape. It's kind of a funny reference, but there is some meaning behind it. I'm obviously going to be a little biased on this video because that's what I do for a living. So I wanted to present some third-party research, specifically from Vanguard and Dalber, to kind of confirm what we do for clients and how we add value. And most of you know a lot of what I do. We do a lot of retirement planning, a lot of projections, a lot of, hey, should I do a Roth? Should I max out 401k? We set up accounts. My assistant Sarah gets everything signature ready, kind of concierge, hold your hand all the way through it so you don't have to go through the hassle of doing all that. So yes, we do all that, but at the end of the day, a lot of people are like, hey, do you guys make us more money than what we might otherwise do on ourselves? And it's very difficult because we don't know what you're going to invest in or what an individual is going to invest in over the next 5 or 10 years. We don't know in advance what that's going to be. I'll give you a hint. It's not about picking a hot stock. And not everyone we're going to provide value for. Some people we're going to provide more value than others. The largest mutual fund company out there, I don't know if it's Vanguard or BlackRock. One's number one, one's number two. But in this case, Vanguard did a study on this. And what they did, and they're and Vanguard, by the way, has historically been a kind of skip the advisor, do it yourself type of a firm. I don't think they are anymore, and I think a lot of it's because of this study. What they did is they have a lot of their clients, and I'm talking hundreds of thousands, if not millions of clients, that set up accounts at Vanguard and buy their mutual funds. They pick them all themselves, right? They've been doing that for decades. Then they have another group where they have their own internal financial advisors that, for an extra fee, these advisors will build a portfolio and manage it in a very disciplined fashion for those clients that maybe don't trust themselves doing it. And they've been doing the advisor version long enough, I think like 15 years now, and they measured their returns. They said, okay, this group of people, on average, picking their own funds, has had X% annual average rate of return. These people using an advisor over a meaningful period of time, 10, 15 years, have had X% annual return. And what they concluded is that on average, the investors that hired the advisory firm, on average, did 3% a year better in terms of returns. It doesn't mean everybody did exactly 3% better, but on the group, they averaged 3%. And so, for example, if I charge 1% of someone's client's portfolio, but they're doing on average 3% better, then they're 2% ahead where they might be on their own if they're the average investor. And they broke that down, and I'm going to put an illustration up on the screen right now. And what Vanguard did is they broke down the value add, and it's titled here, Vanguard's Advisors Alpha Strategy. Where did advisors add value? Suitable asset allocation. On the right, that's how much value was added. Now they talk in lingo, they say basis points. What is a basis point? 1% is 100 basis points. So 3% is 300 basis points. So the second one, cost-effective implementing strategies with low expenses. That would save a client 30 basis points on average. Rebalancing every year, save them 14%. Behavioral coaching, that's the biggie, and I'm going to go on, expand on this more. 0 to 200 basis points. Asset location, where do you have accounts? You have an IRAs, Roth IRAs, after-tax accounts, 0 to 60 basis points. Spending strategy, how do you spend your assets and from what accounts? Up to 120 basis points. Total return versus income, 0. Range of potential added value, up to 3% or 300 basis points in net returns. But again, every client's going to be different. Some may get more value out of these than others. And I've seen this in action. I had a client just recently that was having me help with his 401k at work, where he had most of his investments. And I couldn't formally take that over at the time. Now I can. But I told him, I said, hey, you need to rebalance. You need to put a little bit more here, a little here, here, and here. He didn't do it, because sometimes if it's not done for people, they won't do it. He had to go in and do it himself. He didn't do it. We just had a review, and I said, did you do these things? He goes, no. Well, we figured out it would have made him like 2% a year more money. And it was because he didn't have any exposure to small cap. He had too much exposure to bonds. You know, there's various reasons. And again, it doesn't help every year, but over time, it does. The big one in here is behavioral coaching. The main reason why non-advised individual investors without an advisor, the main reason why they don't do as well as they should is because they don't stick with their investments, and they get fearful and they get greedy. They get scared when markets go down, and they feel like they should make a change, and they sell at precisely the wrong time. They wait for things to get better, as they always do, and then they buy once they feel like it. And they repeat that, and it's human nature. It's one of the biggest areas that I, as an advisor, add value. And there was another entity, and I'll put the second illustration up on the screen now. This is from Dalbar, and what Dalbar did, it's kind of similar to the Vanguard study. They looked at the S&P 500, which is the large cap US stock index, and they looked at the average return on that. And I'm going to skip to the far right, and it's that orange bar, and it averaged close to 10% a year. The blue is they averaged what the individual investor actually made in their accounts. It's less than half. It's like 4% a year. And they attributed it to poor market timing, or just market timing in general. Trying to outsmart things, getting scared when things get rocky. And so that's probably and I'm going to give you some more examples of that, and then I'm going to get to the Bored Ape. So first, I said fear and greed. Those are emotional things that investors, if they're not properly disciplined or advised, these emotions can take over rational thinking, and they can destroy investment returns. I'm going to give you some examples of that. And I'm going to put it up on the screen. And I got this from one of my longtime clients. He sent it to me in the mail with a little note. He said, Eric, what do you think? And the headline of the article is 80% stock market crash to strike in 2016. And it talks about Jim Rogers, who founded the Quantum Fund with George Soros. He said a $68 trillion biblical collapse is poised to wipe out 1 million Americans. And they went on to talk about how the dollar's going to crash, the housing crisis, just doom and gloom. And this was written in 2016, but I get these every year. I see them online, clients forward them to me. There's no shortage of doom and gloom out there. Fear sells, it gets people to tune in, to click, advertisers like it. And he sent me this in 2016, but it could apply really any year since then. The S&P 500 was 2,200 in 2016. Now it's approximately doubled to 4,500. So, and I'm not saying the client would have acted without me sort of talking him off the ledge, but had he did, he may not have never gotten back in and still be sitting in missed out on a doubling of his money. Those are the type of decisions. So that's a fear-based decision that we as advisors are look at history, we look at logic. And I'll give you another one too. I had a client earlier this year, and this is, we're in 2023, but in the spring we're talking about the debt ceiling, a government shutdown, we still had a lot of inflation, we had a bunch of banks fail, we had Silicon Valley and a few other ones. And the conversation was, hey Eric, what about if we just get out, sit on the sidelines, and get back in, when things get better, or we'll get back in lower. And I said, hey, that sounds easy, but in practice, most people fail at that. And what tends to happen is they get out, say they're right, markets drop a little bit, the news gets worse, not better. They don't get back in because they're happy with their decision. Eventually, the news gets better, as it always does, and markets go up. And they typically don't get back in until a level that's higher than what they actually got out at, and they lose, okay? Market timing sounds like it should be easy, but in practice, most people, it doesn't work. And had that client done that, they would have missed out on the first half of the year, which year to date is up 10, 15% for most market indices. So those are fear-based, and rightfully so. We think about that stuff, but that's part of a good advisor's job. And that's the main reason we increase your returns, is from sticking to the plan and not having those really bad mistakes. Now, I also mentioned greed. Those were fear-based decisions. What about greed? I had a client that 5 or 6 years ago, he was referred from an accountant friend of mine. He called me and he said, Eric, I want to buy cannabis stocks, because that's the next big thing. And at the time, these were all small companies. They didn't make any money, barely trading, barely had the financials to trade on the exchanges. And I said, if that's all you want to do with me, I'm not the right client. I'm not the right advisor for you. You just go do that on your own somewhere. These things are incredibly risky. 5 years later, the cannabis industry has grown. The stocks have plummeted because they were overvalued, they were speculative, they were in a bubble. Bitcoin was another example of that bubble. That brings me to the Bored Ape. And I'm going to flash you a picture, illustrate a picture of what they call the Bored Ape. If any of you have heard of an NFT, it is a piece of artwork that's created digitally by the same technology that they use for cryptocurrencies. And all that stuff was super hot in 2021. And this piece of artwork, called an NFT, sold in 2021 for $3.4 million. Someone paid $3.4 million for an electronically created Bored Ape. Today, that that piece of artwork is valued at approximately $57,000. It's a 99% loss. And someone was feeding off their greed emotions, thinking, hey, since these things have been going up, it's the next big thing, not actually looking at things rationally like a good advisor would. So that's the Bored Ape. Hopefully you weren't bored by this video. But I hope, as always, I hope you learned something. I hope you learned how a good advisor will add value. And I'm always here if you want to chat, and we'll see you next time.